Margaret Cavendish grew up in an age when only men and boys acted on the English public stage. She also served as maid of honour to Henrietta Maria, the French queen, who had herself acted in private court entertainments. In exile on the continent, Cavendish watched a variety of women performers. In my opinion, these experiences, coupled with her visionary imagination, allowed her to write female roles intended for women actors. Furthermore, when she uses the term youth, the noun for her appears to encompass both sexes. As she says in the fourth preface to her 1662 volume of plays, certainly there is no place, ways or means so edifying to youth as public theatres, not only to be spectators, but actors. Cavendish's plays are remarkable for their period in offering women substantial and challenging stage roles. Her female protagonists speak the most lines, play the most interesting parts, and dominate the stage.
Well, even now, I mean, there aren't that many really good parts for women. It is still quite a rarity, and that, I mean, Cavendish definitely specialised in that, didn't she? Amazing, sort of really strong female roles.
By turn witty, visionary, idealistic and heroic, they explore possible modes of action in a way that surprises and engages even 21st century audiences. I believe these wonderful stage parts were written for women to perform.
I definitely think there's no question that she was writing for women and for women to explore their identities.
Gender's at the heart of Margaret Cavendish's plays. She is consistently attentive to and sometimes angry about the bad bargain that marriage offers women. She's also critical of the empty lives led by many aristocratic men. She's observant and witty about contradictions and paradoxes in social attitudes, particularly in relation to gender inequalities. She's visionary in imagining future worlds where women might become educated and where they might have the opportunity to become intellectuals, poets, writers, generals. Cavendish's male roles are often subsidiary supporting roles. Male characters appear in cameo parts, which are often comic.
Men in Cavendish's plays very much seem to be in the supportive role. They're playing to the superhero female leads who have much more power, much more intellect, and they're not just striving for sex and marriage.
Men are just in the background there to be looked at by the women, and I think maybe Cavendish was trying to make a point about how often women in her society are just in the background and just there to be looked at.
Many of Cavendish's aristocratic male characters appear idle or unemployed in line with their social status. Sex and drink are often comic elements in the plot relating to the male characters. Male characters have a great deal more freedom than women. Characters such as Lord Title or Sir Experienced Traveller are able to range widely in a whole variety of ways, including sexually.
She's not written it to be spiteful to men, but to write it from a feminist viewpoint. She's trying to underpin the weaknesses of a man. And when a lot of the other times when you're playing a man, the point is to get across the strengths and then the weaknesses that are underneath. And I think perhaps Margaret Cavendish has flipped that on its head.
By contrast, many of Cavendish's female characters are at the point just before marriage will close down their worlds. We often filmed in enclosed interiors to try to reflect this mood. Many female characters, however, reject this option and are eager to explore alternatives such as action, education, independent life. Consequently, the conventional ending of marriage often comes as a disappointment.
Everyone comes in, it's like, you will marry him, and she doesn't say anything. Lady Having never says anything more. And that really disappointed me.
I'd like to know why she did that, why she had this idea that, you know, she wanted all these things to happen, but in the end, you still had to conform to society.
At the end of Lady Contemplation, she does end up going off to get married. Which in the beginning I was a bit sort of gutted about. I thought, oh, can you not go and lead these armies? Can you not go and do these things? But because of the society she was living in, you know, she couldn't.
Marriage was the expected condition of early modern women. As T.E. said in the Law's Resolution of Women's Rights, all women are considered married or to be married. Margaret Cavendish is pioneering in her dramatic attempts to explore alternatives, or at least to mediate the path towards marriage.
You're in love with the wrong person, or you don't want to be in love with somebody, or you don't want to be married, or, you know, it's got to be complicated to have a kind of happy ending. You can't get there simply. It's got to be a struggle.
Her female characters negotiate, explore, broker alternatives wherever possible. Often what the plays have to offer is a temporary reprieve rather than a permanent alternative to marriage, but nonetheless these are visionary ideas for the 1660s. For example, Lady Contemplation's uncertainty and her wish to continue with her intellectual freedom, Lady Happy's silence, the matron's words at the end of the Female Academy, all contribute to a sense that though this is a comic ending, it's not an entirely confident one. Margaret Cavendish is imaginative in her depiction of relationships between servants and their employers, particularly between female servants and their mistresses. For example, in The Religious, the intimacy, the friendship, even the conspiratorial relationship is highlighted between Mistress Oddhumour and her servant Nan.
Nan seems as though she's the main person in her life, even though you see little bits of the father, you hear her mention her mother. Nan's the only one that actually knows her and the only one who will maybe get aloof with her. At the end of the day, Nan was just a servant, and Mrs. Oddhumour knew that as well, because she says, I'll never find a servant that will lie for me like you will.
As she bids goodbye to her servants and to her aristocratic status, poor Virtue makes a chosen social transition across classes in order to take up life at the other end of the social spectrum as a shepherdess. As a writer who also published prose romances, Cavendish uses the romance theme quite frequently in her dramas. She's particularly interested in the plight of the orphaned heroine, characters like Lady Happy, for example, in The Convent of Pleasure, or Poor Virtue, and she's interested in tracing their paths through independence towards marriage. Again, in common with romance, many of Cavendish's female protagonists are sufficiently wealthy to have independence of choice. And again, unconventionally, they choose to use their disposable income to explore alternatives to marriage.
You have to take into account Margaret Cavendish's social position. She was a Duchess of Newcastle. So, of course, she herself is going to be driven by social status and wealth.
Margaret Cavendish's comedy is essentially social and closely aligned to comedy of manners. Much of her comedy is based around the contrast between conventional expectations and the alternatives that some of her characters devise. Comedy is often generated by individual characters' foibles and excesses, as indicated by their names. Cavendish makes even more extensive use than Ben Jonson of aptronyms: Lady Happy, Lady Visitant, Monsieur Advisor, Lord Title, for example.
The plays are observational comedies, and they latch on to manners of the time and manners of people, and that's a style that has resonances with Oscar Wilde and his plays, and that's why a lot of his plays are very accessible to people, because they see themselves and they see people they know, and oh, yeah, that's so true. And I think Margaret Cavendish has very much the same approach to what she's writing about, and that's how she wraps her themes up and makes them enticing to an audience.
Some comedy is visual. Mistress Oddhumour's chair, Lady Contemplation's preoccupation with her vision of her hanged lover, Lady Happy's inability to perceive the true gender of the princess. The comedy is generated by the gap between the individual character's obsession and the audience's more realistic perception of the situation.
It was quite a challenge to play a woman which the other woman wouldn't recognise as being a man, without camping up too much, because I think the audience had to half believe that this man could actually be a woman. You still had the elements that made it comic, but the physicalities were drawn down a bit.
Verbal comedy is generated through the medium of wit, a quality which Cavendish prizes highly. As in the Female Academy, her plays constantly demonstrate that a woman may have wit.
Within a work, there was a lot of stuff hidden underneath which didn't initially come out. I think it was something you have to really, as an audience, you have to sit back and take in and think about.
Cavendish wrote just a few tragedies, such as Youth's Glory and Death's Banquet. However, she's often extreme in her depiction of melancholy or other heightened emotional states, even in comedies such as The Several Wits. She's also fascinated by the theatrical potential of the representation of grief and of funeral. She exploits the theatrical potential of death, drawing on the plays of Shakespeare and Ford, as well as the church and memorial architecture of the period. Working in the historic city of York, I've been very fortunate to have access to a whole range of wonderful locations. The city of York has plenty of historic 16th and 17th century buildings, and we've been privileged to be able to work in them. We've used location filming in these environments as an opportunity to really help to recreate the 17th century sense of Margaret Cavendish's dramas. The Margaret Cavendish Performance Project is fortunate to have many good friends in the city of York. We've had support from York Diocese, York St John College, the National Trust, the Worshipful Company of Merchant Adventurers, York Theatre Royal, Riding Lights Theatre Company, and many other friends. It's given us the opportunity to really recreate the 17th century feel to some of our productions.
We filmed in fantastic locations around York. They're beautiful buildings. We were outside for a week doing some scenes out at Goddard's. And in the summer, out doing something you enjoy doing, you stood in the sunshine with friends and having a good time. Really, it's a pleasure to do it.
I've enjoyed experimenting with the use of music and song in productions of Margaret Cavendish's plays. I've been fortunate to work with 3 different composers, Dave Scarth, David Lancaster and Ralph Bateman. In the Female Academy, we used David Lancaster's trumpet fanfares, actually specially composed for graduation ceremonies in York Minster for York St John College. And we echoed those ironically with the plastic trumpets, the squeaky plastic trumpets that the men blow in their attempt to deafen out the women speaking in the academy. For Youth's Glory and Death's Banquet, Dave Scarth composed music in a modern idiom, but using traditional instruments in order to track the intensity of Lady Sansparei's emotional journey. And he also wrote the tune for the verses that eventually became the funeral song.
There was a text in the play which we wanted to set to music, so there was going to be a song which was going to be played over the final scene of Sansparei, the leading character. My first task really was to set those words to music, and that pretty much established the mood and also provided me with some melodies that I could use in other parts of the score as well. Some of the dramatic contexts perhaps almost make you think more in terms of modern music than period music, so I think you tend to end up with a synthesis of the two, which inevitably happens anyway because film music didn't exist in the 17th century, obviously.
For Lady Contemplation, Ralph Bateman composed the wedding music, and he also wrote the tune for the song that frames the final wedding celebrations and the dance in our production. For the religious, I selected traditional music. Mistress Odhuma's theme song is the traditional Yorkshire folk song, Sorry the Day I Was Married, recorded in Leeds in the 19th century. The wry wit of this song accurately reflects her reluctance to enter on the conventional path, and the Yorkshire origin of the song, again, married very nicely with our Yorkshire settings.
And red were my cheeks as a berry, and my heart was free from all care.
Noble spectators, now you have seen this play and heard it speak, let's hear now what you say. But various judgments, various sentences give. Yet we do hope your sentence it may live, but not in prisons, condemned to lie, nor whipped with censures. Rather, let it die upon this stage, and see the funeral rites, which is to put out all the candle lights. And in the grave of darkness, let it rest in peace and quiet, and not molest this harmless soul, which hopes Mercury unto the Elysian fields its safe convey. But if you sentence life, the Muses will attend it up upon Parnassus hill. If so, pray let your hands here in this place clap it with an applause, the triumph grace.
I think if you can tackle Margaret Cavendish texts, then it kind of stands you in quite good stead to tackle anything else.